Welcome to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25 Media. We feature top founders, executives, and business leaders from all over the world.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show, and we've got another great guest here today. I'm with David Deane-Spread. He is the founder of Metattude, and he has an amazing background, 25 years of various coaching. He was also trained to lead in the Australian Defence Force and law enforcement and other agencies, and he's been coaching a variety of different businesses, CEOs for 25 plus years. He also served as CEO and managing director of public and private companies in Australia and in Europe. And we're going to be talking to him today about preventing business failure and also his formula for business turnaround. So let's start there, David. So you say that it starts with behavior. If you want to turn a business around, you have to look at the behavior of the leaders inside the company or key personnel and start right there. So let's take me through that. Where do you start if you have a company that comes to you and they need a turnaround?
Thanks, John, and thanks very much for having me here. The way I start is looking at the business and getting an understanding of what the culture is like and where are the root causes of whatever their issues and their challenges are. And it always boils down to behavior, and that behavior includes how they use systems or don't use systems, how they treat one another, how they treat their resources, and ultimately how they treat their customers. It's a behavioral thing. And when we realize that all of us in the business are creating the culture of the business, which is a sum of all the people's attitudes inside the business, we realize that we're in a position now to really influence that and help that to change. Because leadership and interaction and teamwork and all of that is conducted by three things: your attitudes, your behaviors, and the conversations that you have. The ABC, basically, of operating a business.
When you come into a company, how do you uncover what the attitudes are, what the culture is, what the behaviors have been? Do you have to really get under the hood? Do you just ask probing questions?
We do. We have a particular diagnostic array of tools which we customize for that particular business. So we don't have a cookie cutter type operation. We are tailoring everything to that particular business because they're all unique. Just like us, we're all unique. We may have some similarities with one another, but we're actually unique. Same with the business.
What about the behaviors? Like you mentioned, like how they treat the customers. How do you figure out how that shows up?
Okay, so if it's a very customer contact centric type organization, we'll even interview customers. However, the one thing that we do know is that the way the leaders treat the people is the way the people treat the customers. And that's just the way human behavior works. We don't do as leaders say, we do as leaders do. We copy them.
Another thing you've said is that every business sits in its own demographic. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so every business has its own shape, size, and its own type of customer base, and its own size of customer base. So if you're looking, say, at a giant global mining company like, say, Rio Tinto, which has many, many, many thousands, I don't even know what their head count is, but they're very, very different to a company that's, not even a tenth of their size, but yet has probably got 250 to maybe 1,000 people in it. They're very different. It's a very different demographic, both in terms of the customer and the shape of the company itself. And so so we have tiers. So there are second, third, second or third tier company, and they sit in that space. And the people that work for those companies are people who probably have already worked for Rio Tinto and don't like working inside a large bureaucracy. So they then move to these smaller companies. They've got expertise and they're very valuable employees, but they have chosen to work in a tighter, smaller, friendlier, actually, as turns out to be, demographic. And their clients, customers are of a similar nature.
How do you get, so let's say you got a turnaround situation with the business. How do you gain alignment? How do you get everyone aligned on a new direction?
Yeah, that's a really good point and very powerful point. And we do that through a range of one-on-one coaching, which is where the biggest bang for your buck is. And then we get everyone on the same page early in the piece by diagnosing where they're at and then creating a workshop for the leaders to bring the leaders together to make an agreement about how we need to be and how we're going to behave from this moment on. And then we learn the new habits and the new ways of having those necessary and sometimes difficult conversations which have been avoided for many, many years. And so every single problem that exists inside a business is caused because the right leader did not have the right conversation with the right person at the right time in the right way, and the problem persists. And it's only when it gets to a breaking point or beyond that the right intervention finally takes place.
How do you get leaders that have failed to have the right conversation at the right time with the right person? How do you get them to start having those conversations?
We coach them one-on-one, and we give them scenarios to work through. We get them to practice. They practice on me. And we get to the point, and very quickly they can see that there's a process of having that conversation. And it's basically observe, listen, ask, very rarely tell. So the more we can actually, and I run them through an exercise, and I actually do it and demonstrate it and then get them to do it. And they then become very confident and competent in having these difficult and necessary conversations. And it can be about letting someone go. It can be talking about a person who's a very high value, but they're prima donnas and they're very high maintenance, those sort of people. And we actually talk to them, because the other side of the coin is that difficult people don't actually mean to be difficult. There's always a reason. And we need to discover what that reason is. And often it's something from the past that they're bringing with them. They've been treated badly by a boss in the past. And so they're here in this place now, and they expect bosses to be the same. It's an automatic belief thing. It's a habit.
Talk to me about companies that coach their team and that don't coach their team. So there are, some companies that, say, well, we don't have time to coach our people. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if the leader is complaining that they don't have time to coach their people, they're too busy doing work that they can't delegate to their team because the team's already full up, then clearly they're not right-sized. And then they come back, oh, no, but we've got budgetary constraints and so, okay, so what you're telling me is that somewhere in the system, maybe stemming from the CFO, we've got the idea of doing more with less, and that's the great disease out there at the moment. Do more with less. And now with tech and AI and everything, we can do even more with even less. And so, and the payroll is regarded by many leaders as being an overhead. It's actually your biggest investment. And you've got to treat payroll like an investment. In other words, you've got to look after it. Yes, it doesn't have to be superfluous. It has to be high value, worth every bloody dollar that you're spending on it. and you need to invest in your payroll. In other words, invest in your people and train them. Recently I worked with a company that has been around for 30 years. They are already the best provider in their space. But the owners who started the business from scratch 30 years ago had never spent $1 on training their people over 30 years. And they were wondering why. They've reached a certain point where, they're feeling that they're stagnating. Indeed, their numbers are showing that they're stagnating. And they've got 2 young sons coming into the business. And the truth of the matter is they need to grow the size of the business because it's going to be feeding 3 families, not just 1 family. And so and then they said, yeah, but we just can't get the people to see that idea of growth. And they're very comfortable in their position. They're very comfortable. We do look after them. Yes, and they do. And they looked after them so much, they've got them now contained. And these people are now got the habit of just doing what we are doing now. And we just repeat that, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, and we'll be fine. And when you start talking about change, no, we don't like change. No, we don't like change. So, okay. So that means we've got to develop the staff. And we're doing that. And we're now watching the numbers increase. We're now watching that business break out of its mold into becoming more open-minded, more willing to do things differently and to do things better. And at the same time, they can see suddenly that they've got a better future ahead of them.
Sometimes you have leaders who feel that they don't have control or they can only control so much. And you say that as a leader, you can only control 3 things: your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own actions. Talk to me a little bit about that idea.
Yeah, 4 things, actually. That you can only control your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own words, and your own actions. Right? And how you deploy those and those meanings you give, those thoughts that you have, need to be absolutely consistent with what the situation is and where you want to go. And I'll give you a really good example that's public knowledge. So I'm going to use Intel, the chip manufacturer.
Yeah.
Intel. Is an Intel in here? Is there?
Yeah.
What is there?
Yeah. Intel inside. Yeah.
Computer. Well, you don't see that anymore. They're funded. In the space of 3.5 years, the CEO, who had built the business over 30 years, came back into the business to rescue it, and in the space of 3.5 years, he cost the business $150 billion, and it was taken off the index because it had diminished to an insignificant size. And there were a series of events that that I've gone into very deeply to actually prove really that it's thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, and combined with your fears or your courage, your useless habits or your better practice, or your ignorance or your constant learning. They're all the causes and remedies of everything. And in every single step that Intel took, you could see that the leaders and the board failed to use their thoughts, feelings, words, and actions in a way that was courageous, better practice, and based on learning. Indeed, they used the old playbook that got the business there in the first place, and they went down the wrong path. And they invested heavily in manufacturing instead of design. NVIDIA went down the design path, and Intel then said, no, we're going down the manufacturing path because we know we and they were getting all their small chips from Taiwan. And the CEO of Intel publicly said, we don't put all your eggs in a Taiwanese basket. That's a very geopolitically wrong and strategically wrong. And, whilst they are correct in that, they actually depended on those chips from Taiwan, and they depended on the relationship they had with the chip manufacturer, and they were getting a 60% discount because of that relationship. And then the CEO came back in and he blew the relationship up by saying that don't invest in Taiwan. And yet they were dependent on it. And so the Taiwanese heard that because it was a public announcement. In fact, they were present when he said it. It was at a conference. They turned around and they said, okay, if that's how you feel, full price for your chips. So they went from being $13,000, $13,800 or something, to $23,000 per chip. And of course that impacted massively on Intel. And then the next step was so that was a not reading it right. That was not a smart thought. They should have realized, yes, what they said was correct. It is geopolitically a risk, but the relationship right now is more important than that risk. So they actually didn't understand that the risk of the relationship was bigger than the risk of the geopolitics. And to this day, Taiwan still hasn't been attacked. So, come on. And yet the chip prices through the roof. So there's a really good example. And there's a whole litany of those errors that both the CEO and the board agreed to. And consequently, $150 billion went down the drain, and that CEO was told, resign or be fired. But it was all too late. It was too late.
Yeah. This has been great, David. So any final thoughts for anyone who's watching this, who's thinking, we need to turn our business around? What are some things that advice you would give them?
Well, the first thing they need to do is to have a look at what the current situation is, and then apply the correct meaning to that situation. Do not act out of fear. In other words, if you can see that there's a problem, be very, very mindful of what other problems might occur if we fix this problem. So be strategic about it, and do not run with the first thought that hits your head. So you've got to think about the fact that fear, habits, and ignorance applied in our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions are the causes of all the problems that we've got. And what got you into this mess is not going to get you out of it. So you have to change the way you think, and we can help there. Change the way you feel, because our feelings are often come first because of a belief we're not aware of. And we can't act out of fear. So the CEO was told by his staff, we can only do $500 million revenue. That's all we can create. And he said, no, it has to be $1 billion. And then he doubled down on it and said $2 billion. And then within 6 months had to bring it back to $500 million. And then when they couldn't do that, they had to bring it back to even worse. And they lost all their credibility. And that was all done out of fear of perception. We have to face whatever the reality is and come up with a different way of thinking. So that's the number one thing they've got to do. And the board has to do that as well as the C-suite.
David, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you and Metattude?
Well, I'm the only David Deane-Spread on the planet. So Google me and you can check me out on Perplexity. You can go to LinkedIn, and you can go to my website.
Excellent.
Website is metattude.com.
And Deane-Spread is DEAN dash spread SPREAD. Yes.
It's DEANE-SPREAD.
Excellent. David, thank you so much.
My pleasure, mate. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25. Visit rise25.com to check out more episodes of the show and to learn more about how you can start your own podcast.